I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, that this is, was and always will be Aboriginal land, and I pay acknowledgement to their elders past, present and emerging. My name's Alison Gibbons. I work for Amnesty International. I'm here today to MC this event to recognise the importance of this work, supporting the survivors of trauma and looking at how we can learn the lessons about how to apply that to peacekeeping in the future. I'm actually here standing in for Tim O'Connor, who many of you may know. Tim couldn't be here tonight. He's recently joined us at Amnesty. On the way out the door, he passed me a note with some apologies for this evening. According to Tim's note, Malcolm Turnbull wanted to be here, but unfortunately he's busy looking for his reason for being Prime Minister. So. Bill Shorten also gave us a yes for this evening, but of course he's saying yes to anything at the moment. Bill Adani, yes. Stop Adani, yes. You know, I don't know what that amounts to. Peter Dutton didn't send an apology because he doesn't apologise for anything. I have heard a rumour that he's on his way to South Africa to see if he can rescue some white cricketers that are out to our streets. It is chastening, though, as Ross Gittins commented today in his column, that we should be surprised that the team that represents Australia believes in cheating and doesn't believe in fair play when they represent a country that doesn't believe in a fair go for people seeking asylum just because they come here by boat. So I'm just going to very quickly thank, obviously, the organisers of tonight's event, the Council for Peace with Justice. Is there a representative here tonight from the council? They're all here. Thank you. And also for the other organisations that supported the event, the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies, Sydney Peace Foundation, New South Wales Starts, who we'll be hearing from later, and Brave Media. So that's probably enough for me, because I'm sure you're all keen to hear from somebody that you probably know as the initiator of Bookshelves Brandis, Freedom Bully Wilson, and of course our former Deputy Prime Minister, the Scarlet Man. I'm talking of course about lawyer, journalist, raconteur and the most prestigious gossip columnist, Mr. Richard Ackland.
Well, thank you, Alison, and I'm sorry that introduction was a bit short. I was hoping it could have gone on and on a bit more. But Dr. Lydia Gitau has gone to a great effort and done us a great favour by producing her book on South Sudanese refugees in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. It is harrowing and hopeful. We have our author in the thick of the Kakuma camp interviewing survivors, finding about their trek by foot from South Sudan, their destruction, their survival, life in the camp, the experience of trauma, and the expectations for peace. Lydia came from Kenya to Australia to pursue her research and develop her thinking about one of the world's great tragedies. Liberally sprinkled throughout are the first-hand accounts of some of the most unimaginable instances of human trauma. Some of it is difficult to read, such as the description by a young woman from the Nuba community who witnessed her father being hacked to death, in the way families get separated, in the chaos of escape. We hear from Abit, a man from the Dinka community, who says, "So you run. You don't see your father, even your mother. You don't see anything. I have no one else." This is so raw that for me I had difficulty understanding the why and the what. History and geography, to some extent, give us context. The southern and predominantly Christian part of Sudan breaks from the predominantly Islam north after decades of civil war. South Sudan has been living with war for 5 decades, internally and against the north. The wreckage inflicted by a civil war of that duration is catastrophic. The English Civil War, by contrast, lasted a mere 9 years, and the US Civil War, a miserable 4 years. 8 years after the North and the South split, there was a civil war in South Sudan, a tribal war, and a war over oil, which in different manifestations is still going on. The human toll has been shocking. Since 2013, more than 50,000 people have been killed. 2.3 million have been displaced externally and another 2 million displaced internally. 5 million people are malnourished, a cruel fate since much of South Sudan is agriculturally fertile. 70% of the schools are closed. The median age of the population of South Sudan is 17 years old. Hatred, rape and murder are everywhere. China and Russia have been supplying weapons. Oil production is half what it was in 2013. The South Sudanese president insists that nothing is wrong. Needless to say, successive peace agreements have broken down. People are fleeing all the time to Kenya, to the Central African Republic, which itself has its own massive problems. Even Sudanese are fleeing to South Sudan. The Kakuma refugee camp in semi-arid northwestern Kenya is home to about 180,000 refugees, about the population of Geelong or Townsville. The 2015 figures say that of those, 91,000 are refugees from South Sudan. The others, mainly from Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was a camp built for 60,000 people, and today, of the 180,000 plus, only 5% are ever expected to leave. It is here that Lydia probes deeply the trauma of war, the walk of more than 500 kilometres from South Sudan, replete with starvation and separation and ruined feet. The camp life with its internal conflicts, violence, its lack of institutional systems, the deteriorating physical and mental health of refugees, and the lack of an expectation of a safe and fulfilled future. One woman, 20 years old in the camp, told Lydia, "I appreciate you for asking me questions and also for coming, because here in Kakuma we are very dry. Yeah, we are drying up. The sun is very hot, so we appreciate the fact that you are here and burning together with us." Another woman who lost her husband said, "I'm just thinking about the children. Sometimes I think too much. I feel sick." Yet there's also resilience. There are people who sing for peace, who give of themselves, who make clothes, who grow food, who still have energy and inner strength. Finally, Lydia gets to peace and how this might be a workable proposition. What emerges are views that we might not have contemplated. One refugee by the name of Amuka says, and I quote, "Peace is whereby someone or relatives visit you and chat together. And someone like a neighbour who can show love and affection to you and that she cares. Now if something happens to you, the here, she can still be there. That's when I realise that there is peace. But if there is nothing like that, I don't know where peace goes or where peace comes from. The peace that I see is you." In other words, there can be war and peace, and at the same time, peace is more than the absence of war. I used to think that the only way of managing the crisis of refugees in our own region, on Australia's doorstep, was to concentrate on the humanitarian needs immediately in the region, and that the old European powers should look after the refugee needs of their former colonies. Sudan's colonial past was in the hands of Britain and even Egypt. I now think that regional responses are only part of a solution in a world of approximately 66 million displaced people, of whom 23 million are refugees and 10 million are stateless. In 2016, just 189,000 refugees were resettled globally. 55% of the world refugees come from war-torn countries, South Sudan, Afghanistan and Syria. Without those wars, the world would have a refugee crisis that was close to manageable. We take a tiny aggregate proportion on a humanitarian basis. And of course, when it comes to South Sudanese refugees in Australia, they are the focus of some pretty primitive political responses to problems that stretch back to half a century of war. Politicians who extraordinarily have furthered their career on the basis of a pride in their inhumanity. I commend Lydia's book to you. From reading it, I learned so much. It brings us a world that is both remote and close, of problems and fates for which we are duty-bound to engage, of voices from an abyss. Congratulations, Lydia, and I declare your book well and truly yours.